Okay, it is recording. So, before we get started, just a big shout out to our sponsors, Adabra, and then also we have Vaco for sponsoring our yearly fees, and Adabra for sponsoring quarterly. And just a big shout out to them. If you're looking for someone to with Adabra, they can come in. I mean, most of y'all know, I've heard of Adabra, and I'm trying to think, is there anybody here that wouldn't know Adabra? It wouldn't know Vaco. If you're looking for a job, SpinMan is going to be your man. For Adabra, they can do local development, full service. Bradley, which I think he's on the call now, he's the guy to reach out to. That's his company. And they have a portfolio that is ranging from full web development services from AWS to Amazon Web Services, also with Lambda. And the company that I'm at with North American Bancard, he is a consultant for, and he builds out in Go and TypeScript and React. So a lot of different technologies that he could help you out with. Thanks again for everybody joining this speaker talk on TypeScript and tips and tricks. If you have any questions, feel free to just jump in at any time. And let's get started. Okay, so here's going to be the topics of discussion, the tips and tricks that we're going to jump into. And basically what I'm going to do is each example that I have some live coding examples, I'm going to switch it over. So we'll see how this goes. And just show the example in a text editor and see how TypeScript reacts to it. So for the first one, we have smarter constructors. And for this, let's start off by building the block that is based on, it's a basic JavaScript trick, not a TypeScript exclusive at first. So what you see here is the constructor inside the class, which is very JavaScript. There's nothing fancy about this with TypeScript in it. With the super handy object assign, simply assigns the object to the class. That is nice for when classes have many constructor parameters. But this is not type safe, as your editor will tell you. And so how do we fix this? One way to fix this is adding in a library called utility types and then passing in non-function keys that this will allow you to have type checking inside your, whenever you instantiate the class. So for, you see new pizza, and if you look at slices and it's required, name is optional. So for this example, slices will bark if it's not included. And let's see if I can go ahead and get this to switch over. 1 second. So in this example, you can see if I remove slices from this class, it's going to throw a TypeScript error. It says argument of type name is not assignable to a parameter of type pick pizza slices and name. So basically it's saying slices is missing in the type but required. And you can see if we remove name, that same error doesn't pop up anymore because it's optional. Now, in the discussion I had at work when I gave this talk, there was an interesting bug that we discovered in this utility types library. I believe that Bradley found this when I was giving this talk, but it's showing required for read-only attributes. So it's saying here that we need to include sauce, and when you're not really wanting to change, sauce, so you shouldn't even have to include it. But that's a weird bug. And Bradley, you may even better explain that than I did just then. I may have butchered that, but basically read only, you can't change it. It's going to be an attribute that is going to be passed in. So you shouldn't have to even, you shouldn't be making a change to it because it's not going to be allowed. Okay, so I think that's it for the smarter constructor. Let me see if there's anything else in here. Yeah, wild name is optional. So this is new to TypeScript. If you recently updated, you would see this new ability to add a new comment called TS expect error. And what this allows you to do is, if you're trying to write a test in TypeScript, you expect it to throw an error, and TypeScript's going to do what it does best and break the test. So you would, even though you're expecting it to throw an error, the test would fail. And with this, you can add in TS expect error comment above it, and that way it'll pass the test. And if so imagine you're writing a test, so you expect specific types to throw an error. Well, with TypeScript, this would give us error showing your test file. Let me see if I can continue on. So basically for this example, you're asserting a specific type of string for those parameters. The solution in 3.9, it brings this feature in here to where by adding the comment, it allows you to still pass it in, but also if it's not being used, in other words, if there's no error thrown, it will result in this message which says unused expect error directive. So that's going to be a nice feature to add as well. One of the questions I had, well, what's the difference between this and the already existing TS-ignore comment that you can add? So in here, so does this mean we need to convert basically all our TS ignores to TS expect error? And I would say no, and here's a list of the differences where and why you should still use ignore versus expect error. And one of them is obviously writing tests. If you're writing a test and you're expecting it to error, more than likely you're going to use the comment above TS expect error. And if you expect a fix to be coming in fairly quickly and you just need a quick workaround, you're in a reasonably sized project with a proactive team that wants to remove suppression comments as soon affected code is valid again. Some reason to use TS ignore would be if you have a larger project and new errors have appeared in code with no clear owner, which can definitely happen on bigger projects. You're in the middle of an upgrade between two different versions of TypeScript, and a line of code errors in one version but not the other. You honestly don't have time to decide which of these options is better, just TS ignore. And yeah, the more than likely, if it's if you don't, for our project at work, I'm using TS ignore when I'm in the code base and there's an issue that I'm trying to get the functionality up and running. I'll ignore it for then and then go back through the ignores and work through the TypeScript errors. And that's the flow that I have at work. And then For TS expect error, I haven't even had a chance to implement this yet, but usually my intention would be to pull it out when I'm writing a test and I'm expecting it to throw an error. I think I do have some examples in here. Let me see. Around, or maybe I didn't for that because it was a simple. I think you can pretty much do it in any file. TS. Yeah, and then so you see you have TS check, expect, ignore, and no check. So expect error. When I first gave this talk at work, expect wasn't even coming up, but it is starting to show up now. So you can easily add it and to your code. Now some linters will have a rule that doesn't allow any comments. So it's doing what we expected. Unused expect error directives. There's no reason. In other words, there's no reason to use it here. And one of the lint rules that we have at work is we don't want TS ignore. It's not showing up in my personal text editor, but at work we have that rule to basically throw an error saying, hey, we don't want TS ignore all over the place, which is funny because then we ignore the lint rule, and we come back to it later and fix it. But all right, so the next thing to discuss is, before I go on, was there any questions about what I've talked about so far with the comment or smarter constructor that you want me to revisit? All right. So this is just taking that whole class, right, and passing it through object assign. With the init, all we did with the type is just assign it like that class typed. So it's just passing in basically that specific type with init. Yeah. Right. Right. Cool. Any other questions? All right. Let's move on to private accessors. So one of the things I discovered when I was digging into more advanced TypeScript was that there was a couple articles, even I believe TypeScript in their own documentation, that was suggesting not to use private accessors in class components. Or maybe that was public. Public was in their documentation, but this one specific was from a blog post that this guy was recommending a different usage for private instead of actually writing private. And the reason why was because private accessors in TypeScript won't actually make your property methods on class private during runtime. It's just TypeScript emulation during compile times. Don't get fooled, make things private by using well-known patterns. So he was saying don't use this. In other words, don't put just private. Can y'all see these slides okay? I didn't even think to ask if they were clear or not. Okay, cool. Oh, has it been switching screen from when I talk and Hangouts. Yeah. Um, all right. Well, if anybody else doesn't know that, I'm glad. Thanks for sharing that. All right. So I will continue on. Private accessors. So here's one example. Name starting with underscore. So basically, I took if you look at the last example, handle change. The only change was private. Now just is gone and has the underscore. So that's one way you can update it. Another way would be if you really want to make those properties private, use symbol for defining those. So basically, it's an array symbol, but it's real runtime private properties are coming to ECMAScript as well. So by adding those symbols, it makes it private. Yeah. Let's see. I don't think I have examples. Do that for private fields? Maybe I do. Oh, this is going to be the next part. So private fields is an addition that was added in version 3.8, which brings support for ECMAScript's private field. Private fields start with a hashtag, or whatever you want to call that character. Sometimes we call these private names. Every private field name is uniquely scoped to its containing class. TypeScript accessibility modifiers like public or private can't be used on private fields. Private fields can't be accessed or even detected outside of containing class, even by JS users. Sometimes we call this hard privacy. So by adding that hashtag in front of name, you'll see here property name is not accessible outside of class person because it has a private identifier. And just to reiterate that, you can see here, if I hover over it, it says that same linter, TypeScript linter error. Is there any questions about that? Okay. Public accessibility modifiers. So, that's funny. I have a capital H. I didn't notice that before. So should you keep public accessors in class components? Well, all members within class publics are actually by default. So they're always in always public in runtime. TypeScript private protected will hide particular class property methods only during compile time. So don't introduce extra churn to your code base. Also use public accessor is not valid idiomatic JavaScript. So basically what he's just suggesting, just go ahead and remove it because it's not adding anything to your code base, and it's already public by default. So another thing that was added around 3.7 was improvements to inference and promise.all. So they've had updates to declarations of functions like promise.all and promise.race. Unfortunately, that introduced a few regressions, especially when mixing in values with null or undefined. Let's see if you can see this a little better. So Bradley did a really good job of re-explaining this than I did, but basically, if you look at lion.roar, it says, object is possibly undefined. And that is resolved in the new, I think the newest version now resolves this issue. Let me see if I can find that. Inference promise.all. Yeah, so these are comments, but there's not actual error that's throwing anymore. Before, it would say object is possibly undefined when it actually was defined. Does anybody have any questions about that one? Yeah, it was a bug that was introduced, I think, in 3.7, and they resolved it, I believe, in 3.9. But yeah, because it's no longer there anymore. Yeah, so it was resolved in 3.9. The fact that seal exhibit contained an undefined, somehow poisoned type of lion to include undefined. Thanks to a pull request from Jack Bates, this has been fixed with improvements in our inference process in TS 3.9. The above no longer errors if you've been stuck on older versions. So yada. Another thing is CommonJS auto imports in JS. So in older versions, TypeScript always assumed that regardless of your file, you wanted ECMAScript style import like. So import star as fs from fs. However, not everyone is targeting ECMAScript style modules when writing JavaScript files. Plenty of users still use CommonJS styles like require. So now TypeScript automatically detects the type of imports you're using to keep your files clean and consistent. So this is a simple one, but it's nice. Code action preserve Newlines. So TypeScript's refactoring and quick fixes often didn't do a great job preserving Newlines. As a really basic example, take the following code. And it's easier explained in this example. So basically you have this option to where whenever you hover over it, you can extract to function in a global scope. And now you have access to that. You can also rename that now to something new. And you can refactor that. So that's a good question. I would have to turn off all the settings on the editor to verify it. But for this, I have Let me see the package JSON. I have TypeScript node utility types inside this package. And I don't even think I have that many plugins extensions that would. I mean, are you saying like you think it's like a VS Code extension, or just the editor itself? Yeah. Yeah. Hmm. Interesting. So like if you have. Oh. I mean, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah. Yeah, I think it is. Y'all are awesome. Um, yeah, so I mean it's a valid question to ask. I'm not sure if that's just VS Code or not. He was wanting to know if like that feature to where when I, yeah, the renaming and making it a global thing was VS Code or if it was TypeScript specific. Yeah. Yeah, I mean they put it in their editor notes in their documentation. Refactoring quick fixes often don't do a great job preserving new lines. Um, so I mean, they're saying that it's coming from TypeScript. Yeah. No, that's a good question though, man. Right. I think this is talking about something else now. Quick fixes for missing return expressions. Um, yeah. Cool. So there has been some speed improvements. Our team specifically uses Material UI. We don't use styled components, so we won't see any improvements there. But um, they've increased or reduced compile times by 5 to 10%, which is pretty big. And then they believe that they've achieved a 40% reduction in Material UI compile time, which is pretty significant. And especially when you're using Material UI, to see that improvement, it's pretty awesome. So any other questions before we wrap this up? A lot of good discussions. This has been really good. So for compiling, we have TypeScript caked into Webpack, and that handles all the compiling. And is that what you're asking? Yeah, yeah. We use. Yeah, from the CI part of it, it's just Jenkins, right? Is that what you're referring to? And yeah, right. Yeah, yeah, right. Yeah, we recently updated, didn't we? I mean, now we had a refactor with something that Justin did, and that caused a huge increase of like, I wouldn't say increase, but a reduction in our compile time. Um, and that's when I noticed it. I don't think I've noticed it on this particular one as much as they were saying. I mean, they're really toting it on this 3.9, but we felt our improvement when Justin was refactoring some of the compile time with Webpack. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Anybody else? Yeah, material UI. Yeah, let me see. Let me pull it up. Bots. Cool. One last shout out to our sponsors. So Vaco Spinman, if you're looking for a new job, or if you're if you're in the job market, call Spinman. If you're looking to hire, call Adabra, because Bradley does a ton of work in Murfreesboro area, but he also does it statewide. So thanks again, everyone, for being a part of this. I'm going to head and turn off this recording. And if y'all want to stay and chat, you can. I think I can keep the chat system thing open. Otherwise, we may call it a night.